I've titled today's message, When It Matters. When It Matters. See, I believe our passage that we're going to be reading of today, we're going to be reading out of 1 Corinthians. I believe our passage today, written by the Apostle Paul, he was going on the same rant, if you will, that Allen Iverson was thousands of years ago. So he was the one saying, we're talking about practice. We're talking about practice in 1 Corinthians. And he's writing to the church in Corinth. For a little bit of context, he's writing to a modern cosmopolitan city like a modern-day New York or Hollywood or Vegas, just to give you an idea of kind of what we're dealing with the group who's receiving this letter. Very individualistic culture, much like, us, which means that, they were all about me, quite like our culture today is. Everything's all about us, what best conveniences us, and, everything involves how can I help myself. And he's writing to them, and see what has happened is that culture has seeped into their everyday lives, and they have started to try to accommodate their faith to what is palatable based off their individualistic culture. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. So we're going to be looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the end of chapter 12, and then the beginning of the end of 12 and the end of chapter 13. Many of you are familiar with 1 Corinthians 13 because you've been to weddings before. And you've heard it's the love letter. It's love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all. It just goes on and on, all about love. If I have all the things, Paul says, but if I do not love, then I have nothing. And it's all about love. Well, many of you may have been thinking, well, this is so poetic and it's so beautiful. And, we use it in weddings and it's so popular. And people have it written or have it framed in their homes. And it's talking all about love. Well, the truth is today, to let some of you down, he actually was writing this to correct people. He was actually ranting when he wrote this. He was in the middle of 1 Corinthians, if I can be honest, it's one giant rant. And I can feel the frustration from Paul, and he's writing it to these people who are like a Hollywood, New York, and a Vegas, who are very individualistic, and he's ranting, and he's trying to correct a lot of the issues that has seeped into their belief system, into their faith, and he's writing this to correct them. And it's not, all lovey-dovey and love bears all things believe. It wasn't written so that somebody could use it for a wedding, and it's beautiful, and we should, and it's true, but I think it's incredible that we kind of miss that context. But see, here's what's happening. If I can just lay it out for you. The believers, like I said, this was seeping into their belief system. A lot of the ways that they were believing was, because they were trying to satisfy their cultural, individualistic mindsets as well as their faith. So they were kind of twisting things. Well, they had become divided. The church had become divided. And the division was this. What should be prominent? What should be most important? I'm going to be honest with you. I believe the things that divided the church in 1 Corinthians is the very same things that never got resolved that are still dividing our churches today. And you're going to see what I'm talking about. So this rant is not only thousands of years ago to the church in Corinth. This rant is to the church today, the modern day church, to culture church, to all churches. Paul is writing this, God is inspiring this, and they are discussing what deserved prominence, what deserved importance. And these are the same arguments that churches today have. For example, I'm going to give you a few. I have a few in my notes here, but maybe you have a personal experience with a church before, and you're like, this argument was so ridiculous, but somehow, I'm going to give you some here. Some things that churches still argue about or have argued about over centuries is the dress code. Are we going to have to, obviously here, we don't care. The dress code. Just come in your pajamas. It's fine. Just don't show up naked because nobody needs to see that. Anyways, but dress code. Do I need to dress nice? Do I not need to dress? Do I need to wear a hat? Do I not need to wear a hat? Am I allowed to have a tattoo? Am I not allowed to? Everything was an argument. Everything. And then not only are we going to argue about that, we're going to decide how much prominence does that get. Is that the number one thing? Is that what matters the most when people come into our church? Other things like, man, I've heard some crazy church arguments before. Maybe if you've ever experienced this. Are we going to, I've literally lived this. Are we going to have a cross in the sanctuary? Because it's not Christianity if we don't have a cross. Where's our cross? We don't have a cross. But for some reason that has been an argument for centuries in church. We don't represent Jesus if we don't have a cross. Where's our cross? And that's broken churches up. Or the style of music. Are we going to have hymnals? Are we not going to have hymnals? Are we going to play modern music? Are we going to play older music and things of that nature? Are we going to have an altar that people can come down to? Are we not going to have an altar? And people have forgotten that you are the altar, and these things are just interesting to me. I've seen some interesting arguments. Here's another one, an argument over communion. Are we going to have gluten-free bread or not? Because this is important for some reason. A dispute in church over communion. Another one is, I literally was reading about this the other day. A church got into a fight. They were upset because for communion they didn't have grape juice. They had cran grape. And obviously the Bible is very clear that it's grape juice. That's a joke for it's not actually in there. It was wine, so we're all doing it wrong. Anyways, but these are the ridiculous arguments that have existed for centuries, and they're all different. And these were some of the arguments that were taking place here in the church in Corinth. Maybe not specifically those things, but you get what I'm saying. They were ridiculous. They really had no point to them, but for some reason they mattered enough to split churches apart. There's been things that are even more dumb than the things I've mentioned that have split churches apart. And it was all about who could teach, who could speak, who could sing, and what are we going to prioritize? Are we going to prioritize that this spiritual gift means the most, or this spiritual gift means the most? And what's going to be most important? How are we going to initiate newcomers when they come into our doors and to our faith? This was the conversation that was going on at the church in Corinth. And these are the earliest churches, folks. This is literally not long after Jesus was on the earth. The church is just beginning, and we're already having these types of disagreements and these types of arguments. Well, if you remember last week, I made a claim. The title of the message was Welcome to Initiation. And I said to you, I believe we need more initiation in the church. And then I went on to explain and illustrate that we are not the initiators. We are simply the responders, that faith has been initiated by Jesus. He who knew no sin became sin so that you and I could become righteous. He loved us first, so it is our grateful response to love others. But oftentimes we feel and we act like we are the initiators. But you see, Jesus is the groom to our bride. He is the initiator of our faith. And I talked about how we need to live at the place of initiative. Oftentimes we go to we're at the place of initiative. Oh my gosh, Jesus saved me. And then we leave that place and then we make it all about us initiating our faith for the rest of our lives. And in fact, we should just be responding, staying at the place where Jesus saved our souls, and we would get the response that we're looking for. So today, it's all about how do we live at that place of initiative? How do we collectively, last week I guess it was more about you individually, but how do we collectively as a church live at the place of initiative? How do we reflect and how do we showcase initiation to newcomers? Just the same conversations that were being had thousands of years ago in the church in Corinth. Well, I believe today, Paul's rant, if you will, we're talking about practice, is going to help us answer that question today. Let's look together now at 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and we're going to be reading, and it'll be on the screen, verses 27 through 32. Here's how it starts. You are the body of the Anointed One. Church, we are the body of the Anointed One. This is not just going to the church in Corinth thousands of years ago. This is going to the Culture Church today, September 26, 2021. We are the body of the Anointed One. Each of you is a unique and vital part of it. You need to know that today. You all have infinite value in God's eyes. You may not be the singer, you may not be the preacher, you may not be the teacher, but you have infinite value and you play a unique role in God's kingdom. Verse 28. God has placed in the church the following. And remember, this is a rant, so maybe I should put a little emphasis on this. First apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then those with gifts of miracles, gifts of divine healing. And many of you may be going, well, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to get to the point. Don't write these down in order. That's not important. Gifts of divine healing, gifts of revelation knowledge, gifts of leadership, and gifts of different kinds of tongues. Verse 29, not everyone is an apostle or a prophet or a teacher. Not everyone performs miracles or has gifts of healings or speaks in tongues or interprets tongues. But here we go. This is our key verse. But you should all constantly boil over with passion in seeking the higher gifts. If you have a highlighter or if you just want to mentally highlight those words in your mind, passion in seeking the higher gifts. That's what we're going to focus on today. What are the higher gifts? And now I will show you a way to live, a superior way to live, a better way to live that is beyond comparison. So he's in the middle of this rant and he's telling them, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. He's going on the list of things. Oh yeah, that sounds good. That's definitely how we're trying to initiate people. Show them the tongues, show them the prophecies, show them the miracles, show them the healings. Like these churches, this is what they were all about. What is going to be prominent? Today, is it going to be somebody's going to have a miracle? Today, is it someone's going to give a word to someone, speak a word over someone? Is it today that someone is going to have a revelation of knowledge that's going to help somebody out? They were obsessing over all these spiritual gifts that are beneficial. Hear me loud and clear. They're beneficial. And he goes on this rant and he says, but you should be seeking the higher gifts. And they hear that and they're like, okay, well, you said that. Let's go back. You said that first apostles. Okay, the higher gifts. First, I should be an apostle. That's what it is. Seek the higher gifts. So we're going to answer the question today, what is the higher gifts? And he says, I will show you a superior way to live that is beyond comparison. Scholars are upset about the fact that we have chapter breaks in the Bible, because that's not something that actually existed in the original language. Actually, from here, because it would go straight into 1 Corinthians chapter 13, which we're all familiar with as the wedding. I'm pretty sure if we never had it go into that, we probably wouldn't use it in weddings. I think it's interesting. But this chapter break, just imagine it's not actually there, that he is just on a tear on this rant, and he goes, I'm going to show you a superior way to live, and then he goes right into it. But we're going to pause there for a moment, because I got a few things to look at for just a moment. Remember I said last week that I believe we have settled for information over initiation. See, we've been focusing, just like these church, or the church members in Corinth, the Corinthians, they were focusing on all these different things that were dividing them, that were creating division. Is it someone's going to give a word today? Is it someone's going to heal somebody today? Is it someone is going to perform a miracle today? And in our modern churches, is it or how many songs are we going to have today? And how long can the preacher speak? Because we can't let him go too long. I know he's speaking directly the words that God would give him, but let's put a time limit on that. You know, we don't, like, it's the craziest thing. I just need your permission. We're going 2 hours today. Okay. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But, yeah. Shot down by one, always. You were late. You don't get to do that. But these divisions, you know, all these crazy things, are we gonna have Sunday school, or is Sunday school an old word? We should call it like connect groups or something. That really doesn't make sense anymore. You know, and this is crazy divisions that were happening in the church. And Paul is ranting, going, seek the higher gifts. Actually, with passion, seek the higher gifts. Let me show you a superior way to live. And then he goes into the love passage. And I think it's incredible that in the middle of this rant where he's making all these corrections, he takes time to talk about love. And you've all heard the verses before about love leading up to verse 8. So I'm not going to go over those again. We can another time. But I'm going to start for the sake of time today at 1 Corinthians 13, verse 8. And this is what it says. Remember, I'm going to show you how to live a superior way. Love never stops loving. That's how he begins. It extends beyond the gift of prophecy, which eventually fades away. It is more enduring than tongues, which will one day fall silent. Love remains long after words of knowledge are forgotten. Our present knowledge and our prophecies are but partial. There it is. There's our word. We're talking about practice. We're talking about the partial. Our present knowledge and our prophecies are but partial. Church in Corinth, culture church. But when love's perfection arrives, the partial will fade away. When I was a child, I love these verses. I spoke about childish matters. For I saw things like a child, reasoned like a child. But the day came when I matured and I set aside my childish ways. See, I have been patronized as a young person in church before for my preaching because I'm not given enough milk, or I'm given too much milk, I'm not given enough meat. Have you ever heard those verses before? We'll talk about those another time. But I'm not given enough meat, and I have been patronized. Why didn't you come back? Well, Levi, it just wasn't enough meat for me. I just needed something a little bit more, just something a little bit more practical. I'm not going to lie to you. I beat myself up sometimes preparing messages because I look at it and I'm like, man, that really preaches to my heart, to my soul, but that's not enough practicalities. They need something for a Monday. Hey, Levi, what's going to help me with my finances? What's going to help me with my relationships? What's going to help me with my pain? What's going to help me with this? I need like a 4-step process, maybe 5 steps. If you've got 5 steps, that'll be better than 4 steps because I really like 5 steps. And I beat myself up sometimes because I have been told that I speak about childish matters. Levi, it's one thing to talk about salvation, but eventually we got to move on. It's a continuation of salvation. So we need to talk about the deeper things. We need to talk about the spiritual gifts. We need to talk about the healings. We need to talk about the tongues. We need to talk about the prophecies. We need to get on with this thing because you're talking about childish matters. And I have beaten myself up about these things. And then I look at these verses and I read them in context and I recognize the very same thing that people are saying to me is the very same thing that Paul's going on a rant about, saying, no, we're talking about practice. When I was a child, I spoke of childish matters and I reasoned like a child. But a day came when I matured. He's not talking about maturing and then therefore talking about things that don't matter. And I'm not saying that spiritual gifts and other things like that don't matter, but I'm saying that he is calling maturity love's perfection. Church, this can help some people today. I set aside my childish ways. For now we see but a faint reflection of riddles and mysteries as though reflected in a mirror, but one day we will see face to face. My understanding is incomplete now, but one day I will understand everything, just as everything about me has been fully understood. Until then, there are three things. There are three things. Seek the higher gifts, a superior way to live. There are three things that remain: faith, hope, and love. Yet, here we go. Love surpasses them all. So above all else, let love be the beautiful prize for which you run. See, I think it's interesting. I just told you I have beaten myself up because I felt like I've been patronized. Levi, you're not really giving me the meat. And I really need some meat today. And I'm like, you just need to go to the butcher's market because I can't help you. But anyways, have you noticed that we love to obsess as Christians over our function in our faith? What is it that I can do? What is it that... And when we hear a message, it's like, what can I take away from that as good living, as a good practical way to live? And maybe we're listening to the messages all wrong. See, we obsess over our function. Have you ever noticed? And I heard, I'm going to steal this from Pastor Judah Smith because I love him, and I was listening to his message the other day, and I thought it was so beautiful that he talked about this. He said, have you ever noticed in church the most popular messages are not about everything about who God is. It's all about what I can tell you. And I'll give you an example. And I'm not hating on this guy. I think he's inspired by God, and I love all his messages. Pastor Mike Todd, he blew up. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. But his main series is called Relationship Goals. And it's all about relationships. And basically, he's going through these things, and it's incredible, and I'm not knocking it. But we love things that give me something practical to live by, how I can function correctly. And those popular messages in church is, tell me what I can do. And if you ever noticed, the most popular church songs are all about us. We fall down. And I'm just so passionate. I'm so devoted. God, I'm so amazing. And we lay our crowns. And I'm just going to get down on my knees. And I love that song. We worship to that song. I surrender all. This is something else that Pastor Judah talks about. We love to sing about our surrender, our devotion, our passion, our drive. God, I love you so much. God, I'll do anything for you. I am a friend of God. Come on, church. And it's all about how incredible we are in our devotion, in our relation to God. Have you ever noticed these things? It's interesting to me. We have more songs about our devotion, about our passion, about our drive, about our love for God, rather than, oh, how He loves us. And it's become so inward focused, and we obsess over our function. But here's what's crazy. Here's what happens when we focus on our function. First, it becomes about, what can I do? I look inward. How can I take a practical takeaway from this message? What can I do with this? And then it goes next. If we shut that down, and then we go, here we go, this is important, catch this, then we go to God's function. This is huge, because some of you are hearing messages and you're going, oh, I need to stop focusing on myself. Levi's right, I'm focusing too much on how I function. But then you go to God's function. Did you know that God's function is not what's most important about God? We're focusing on God's function because we obsess over our function. So then we go to God's function, and it's about, God, what can you do for me? God, like, I'm going through pain right now. Would you help me? God, what have you done for me lately? God, would you take this circumstance away? God, would you take care of this? Would you do this? God, and notice most of your prayers, and I'm not knocking your prayers, like Lord receives them all. He loves you and He wants you to talk to Him. But notice you go from your function to God's function. God, what can you do for me? And God, I've been going to church. I've been really nice to people. I've been good to people. I've been talking to people. I've just really been trying. I've been doing everything I can. But God, you're not returning the favor. And then you go to God's function and you're praying, God, would you help me with this? And God, would you take care of this? And God, would you be a genie and do this and this and this and this? And you're so focused on God's function and what He can do for you. And this hit me like a wrecking ball because I live this way. I go from myself, I need to stop focusing on myself, but then my mindset still doesn't change because I keep it about function, and we focus on what God does and does not do instead of who He is. And we focus on function rather than essence. God, what can you do for me? God, what are you going to do next for me? And we have treated faith like a transaction. I'm going to go to church, and then from that, there should be an exchange. God should help me through this week. I'm going to sing this song of worship, and then I'm not going to have road rage because I'm not going to get in any bad traffic because God's going to take care of that. I'm going to do this, and then God's going to transaction, and this is going to happen. Everything in our faith is just a swap. I do this, God, you do this. And your expectation is that God is going to take care of this because you're focused on His function, because you're focused first on your function, and then you're like, oh, I need to stop doing that. And then you're focused on what He can do for you rather than who He is. And can I just say this today? I just want this for my life. Can we stop needing a reason for everything? Can we stop needing a reason to go to church? Can we stop needing a reason to worship? Can we stop needing a reason to pray? Can we stop needing a reason for every single area of our life that involves God? Well, I'm going through some stuff right now, so I'm going to hit my knees. Well, I really need help this week because I got this test, so I'm going to go to church. Well, there's somebody there that I know today, or I want to go hear this person speak, so I'm gonna do this. And everything that involves God in our lives, we need a reason to involve ourselves with our Maker, because everything's a transaction. Can I tell you something? And I may get emotional trying to tell you this because it's still hitting me and it's still so real to me. In my personal life, but He has given you a reason, and it's not because of what He does, but it's because of who He is. He could have done nothing, and He was worthy, and I can prove it to you. We just sang, the one who was and is to come. Was and is. You need to focus on was, is, and is to come. What He's all time. He's infinite. He's omnipresent. He's omnipotent. He's omniscient. Did you know God didn't become captivated by your potential? It wasn't just, and so many, we preach this. We literally preach this in church. I don't know if we're meaning to, but we do. That somehow, some way, that God eventually along the line became captivated by our potential. If you would just repent, brother. He loves you if you would just get right with Him. And there's no evidence to suggest that He all of a sudden became captivated of what you could be. Everything in the Bible suggests that He was captivated because of who He is. He is love's perfection. Before the foundations of the world, He didn't need to see you. He chose you before the foundations of creation. The Bible says He knit you together in your mother's womb. He knows the number of hairs on your head. He is obsessed with you. It's who He is. He chose you. This is incredible, church. He chose you. Yet while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He who knew no sin became sin so that you and I could become righteous. He didn't need a reason. It's because of who He is. He was captivated by you all along. He didn't all of a sudden become captivated. He's not waiting on you to repent to become captivated by you. You fell into this trap that I'm not worthy until I repent, until I get right with God. And yes, He wants relationship with you, but He died for you while you were still a sinner. So it's not that eventually, one day, you're going to all of a sudden become appealing to Him. Before you ever took a breath, I just need you to get this. I've been living my life, and I've been so captivated by my circumstances, so captivated by everything that's going on in my life, by my pain, by my struggle, by my situation. And God's just hitting me with this, Levi. Levi, don't you realize that before anything, before I spoke the world into creation, I chose you. I chose each and every one of you. How much more does He love us? How much more will He take care of us? He's not waiting on one day. He became. Remember, He is the initiator. He is the initiation. He became so that we could become. It says, seek the higher gifts. The higher gifts. What is the higher gifts? It says, it's not the this, the that, this spiritual gift, this. It's not when people come in, well, we need to make sure that they understand this, and we need to impress them with our information, with our knowledge, with our own spiritual gift that we could give to them. We need to seek the higher gifts. That's what He says. He says these things are only partial. We're talking about practice. Allen Iverson said, we're not talking about the game, when it really matters, when it actually matters. So church, when it actually matters is love's perfection. Who is love's perfection? It's Jesus. He was the beginning. He is the beginning. He chose us. He loved us first. He became so that we could become. And there's three things that remain: faith, hope, and love. But there's one that surpasses them all, he says. What's that one thing that just surpasses them all? It's love. It's not your love for Him. It's the initiation sequence that we all recognized last week. It's His love for us. He loved us first so that we could receive His love and respond to His love. Our job is to respond to His love. If we want to have more initiation in church, we're going to have to lay aside all the things that we think will impress. And we're going to have to stay at the place of initiation. And when people come in, we just got to sit back and throw up our hands and respond to His love. We can't be the first thing to hit them. It's got to be His love. We can't be the first thing to impress them, because all those things will fade. They are but partial. They are but practice. When it actually matters, the only thing that matters is Jesus and His love. And if we live at that place, it says, let love be the beautiful prize which you run. Let love be the beautiful prize which you run. I just want to live my life at the place of love. It's Christ who loved me first. It's Christ who loved us first, church. That's what it's all about.